6 months ago, I installed a doorbell camera thinking it would provide a bit of extra security for my quiet suburban home. But instead, what I found when I finally reviewed the footage made me move out. The strangest, most unsettling figure kept appearing during the dreaded dead hour between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Step into my nightmare as I reveal the disturbing patterns I discovered in my own front yard. It was a quiet Tuesday when I decided, out of boredom, to peruse the backlog of my doorbell camera footage. I wasn't quite sure what I was looking for, perhaps the neighbor's cat or a stray raccoon. But instead I noticed a figure standing just beyond my driveway. It lingered at the edge of the camera's range, only motionless. Curiosity turned to unease when I noticed the timestamp. 3:03 a.m. Each clip was eerily similar. The figure appeared every week almost to the minute. It stood just on the periphery, neither approaching nor retreating. A chilling consistency that seemed less like coincidence and more like routine. The phenomena of repeated behavior in seemingly unexplainable events taps into our fear of the unknown. The consistency of the clip suggests a pattern we instinctively feel must mean something significant, say, or dangerous. The so-called dead hour is when our mental defenses are lowest, making us more susceptible to fear. What do you think the figure wants? Would you confront it if you saw something similar on your footage? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a purpose behind these visits. The next series of clips confirmed my suspicions, as the same figure started displaying what seemed like erratic movement, a slight tilt of the head here, a turn there. It was as if they were observing my home or something within it. One particularly dreadful night, the figure lifted what appeared to be a long object, pointing it towards my front door. The grainy clarity of the footage did little to reveal its purpose, but the act itself was enough to freeze my blood. The fear of being watched is deeply rooted in our psyche. Surveillance raises our anxiety because it strips away our comfort of privacy. Combining this with nocturnal threats amplifies a primal fear, the unseen enemy lurking in the shadows. What would you do if you felt like you were being watched? Would this be enough to report to the authorities? I kept watching, each week's footage more unnerving than the last. The figure began to step closer, breaching further onto my property's boundary, as if testing the limits. This new development was different, almost interactive in nature. One morning, after a particularly restless night, I noticed that items on my porch had been shifted, seemingly without reason, but undeniably so. Reviewing the camera once more, I saw the figure just inches from the step, extending a hand toward the doorbell, yet never ringing it, just hovering. The notion of someone physically invading our safe spaces is universally unsettling. It triggers a deep-seated instinct for self-preservation and defensiveness as rationality wars with fear. The idea of a lingering yet unexplained presence touching our environment is particularly disturbing. Imagine waking up to find traces of a stranger in your own space. Would you take action, or chalk it up to paranoia? The growing brazenness of the figure reached its peak when one night the footage captured a shadow lurking against the wall, blotting out part of the house as the figure leaned in close. It was the first time I noticed what could be discerned as deliberate, a systematic inspection of the boundary between us. The barrier of the camera was its own undoing. I felt more isolated and vulnerable. At this point, my sleep was fractured. Nightmares unspooled their horrors, mirroring what the footage suggested, but magnified tenfold by the imagination. Observing shadows can evoke our most primal fears. The silhouette can represent something deeply threatening while remaining abstract, feeding our imagination. Our mind completes the unseen details, often making them worse than reality. How would you cope with seeing such a shadow in your yard? Would you still feel safe? Then came the flickers, intermittent glitches that seemed to interfere with the camera feed whenever the figure was near. It was as if its mere presence disrupted the normalcy I had come to rely on. Each flicker presented disjointed images that never fully resolved, sparking frustration and an illogical desire for more clarity amid the madness. Without realizing it, my livelihood became entangled with the contents of these nightmarish videos. A grim reverie that offered no peace, only chaos. Visual disruption through flickers and glitches fuels our anxiety by distorting reality. It creates a visual uncertainty that destabilizes our perception and control, challenging our understanding of what is real. How would you react to a camera malfunction that occurs only when a stranger appears? Would you trust your own eyes? What felt like a spiral into madness began to climax as I noticed new footage. It developed an unintended frame. A spotlight, seemingly cast from nowhere, illuminated the figure's face for the first time, revealing just enough to unsettle, yet not enough to soothe my anxiety. These events felt almost staged, as if this figure wanted to give just enough details to keep me on edge. The psychological push-pull of retaining control against an ambiguous danger was suffocating. The unveiling of partial identity tugs at our instinctual fear of recognition without comprehension. Faces affect us because they hold intent, emotion, and familiarity, even when resisted by ambiguity. Would you try to identify the person from their features, or would that be too terrifying? I was at a breaking point. The obsession to document these sightings consumed my waking thoughts. It escalated to an ultimate test. The figure now reached the doorstep, stopping just shy of touching the doorknob. It stood, its presence a looming omen of what could happen next. My hand hovered over the intercom button. The sheer weight of uncertainty made the act seem futile. Was it even safe to engage anymore? Vulnerability at one's doorstep molds fear into survival instincts, a reminder of boundaries crossed. This moment questions our fundamental safety and triggers the adrenaline-infused fight or flight more acutely than we often experience. If you were in this position, what would you do? Open the door or remain silent? The crescendo peaked one fateful night as I lay watching the latest clip. The figure simply vanished into the shadows, but not before holding up a strangely familiar object. A photograph. It was unmistakably mine. The final puzzle piece slotted into place. A resignation I hadn't imagined soared over me as I realized each visit had a purpose, a chilling fanfare to my own belongings. The perception of personal invasion through the mundane, a photograph, shifts fear from physical threat to psychological warfare. It strikes at control in the personal dominion of one's world. Would finding something personal in a stranger's hand motivate you to leave as it did me? And that, dear viewer, is the story of why I moved out. A sanctuary turned sovereignty of fear and an unknown watcher's playground. Are you brave enough to face your own 3 a.m. demons? CTA. Which clip was the most disturbing for you? Would you dare to check your own footage after this?